The summer heat pressed down heavy, thick with the scent of cut grass and engine oil. I stood on my porch, watching dust swirl around Jamie's truck as he pulled into the driveway. He always drove with one hand on the wheel, his arm hanging out the window like he had nowhere to be. He climbed out, squinting against the sunlight. "You call me all dramatic, saying your car's dead, and it's just sitting there like it's taking a nap." "It is dead," I said, stuffing my hands in my pockets. "Trust me." Jamie smirked. "We'll see." I swallowed hard, watching him roll up the sleeves of his old gray t-shirt. His forearms were tanned, marked with smudges of grease from a lifetime of fixing things. Cars, engines, anything mechanical. It was what he did, what he'd always done, what I had always watched him do. I wasn't sure when it started, this feeling, this quiet pull. Maybe it had always been there, waiting for me to realize it. Or maybe I'd only begun to notice the way his voice curled around my name, the way his eyes lingered a fraction longer than they should. Not that it mattered. Jamie had been in my life since I was a teenager. My aunt's husband, ex-husband now, but it didn't make much difference. He wasn't blood. He wasn't family. He was just Jamie, the guy who stuck around, the one who never felt like an uncle at all. He wiped his hands on his jeans, popped the hood for me. I turned away quickly, grateful for the excuse to look anywhere but at him. My fingers fumbled with the latch before it gave, and the hood groaned open. Jamie leaned in, studying the engine like it was speaking to him. "Battery's fine," he murmured, hands moving over wires and belts. "When's the last time you changed the spark plugs?" "That's a great question," I said. "I don't have an answer." Jamie huffed a laugh. "Yeah, I figured." I leaned against the car, watching the way his hands moved, precise and sure. Sweat dampened the back of his shirt, clinging to his skin. I looked away before my thoughts could get ahead of me. "You've been quiet lately," Jamie said after a moment. I hesitated, just thinking. "About—" I opened my mouth, but the words lodged in my throat. "You. The way you look at me sometimes. The way I wish you would." I swallowed. "Nothing important." Jamie glanced up, something unreadable in his expression. For a second, it felt like he knew exactly what I wasn't saying. And for the first time, I wondered what he would do if I just said it. Jamie sighed, shaking his head as he reached into the engine. "You really are helpless." "Not true," I shot back. "I'm great at some things." "Yeah? Name one." I hesitated. "I make a mean grilled cheese." Jamie let out a low chuckle, the sound of it settling under my skin. "That's your claim to fame?" "Absolutely." He smirked, but didn't look at me, focusing instead on twisting something under the hood. His hands worked with easy familiarity, the way they always had. I'd seen him like this 100 times before, under the hood of my aunt's old car, fixing a leaking pipe in the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves to get his hands on whatever needed working on. He was always fixing things, and I was always watching. When I was younger, it was admiration. He was the cool guy who showed up at family barbecues with an old truck and a leather jacket, teasing me like an older brother would. He taught me how to drive stick shift in a parking lot when I was 16, laughing every time I stalled out. He always had this effortless confidence, like nothing rattled him. But at some point, admiration had turned into something else, something heavier. Jamie had been there through a lot, through my awkward teenage years, through my first heartbreak. He was the one who listened when my dad and I fought, who slipped me a beer at family parties when no one was looking, who told me to get out of town if I ever had the chance. I wondered if he realized how much I'd listened to him. "How's work?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Same as always," I said. "Fixing other people's messes for minimum wage." "You ever think about doing something else?" "Sure. All the time." Jamie turned to me then, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression was unreadable. "So why don't you?" I let out a short laugh. "Oh, I don't know. Fear, lack of ambition, complete and total paralysis when faced with change." His lips twitched, but he didn't smile. "You're too smart for that." I swallowed. The way he said it, quiet and certain, made my throat feel tight. He looked at me for a second too long before turning back to the engine. I let out a slow breath, dragging my hands through my hair. "You never answer my question," he said after a moment. "Which one?" "What you've been thinking about." I hesitated. The truth was, I'd been thinking about him, about how it felt different now, how it was getting harder to ignore. I've been thinking about how I sometimes caught him watching me, about the way my stomach twisted when he did, about how, when I was younger, I used to wonder what it would be like to have someone look at me the way Jamie once looked at my aunt. And now, I wondered what it would be like if he looked at me that way. But I couldn't say any of that. So instead, I shrugged. Just life, I guess. Jamie made a low, thoughtful sound, but he didn't push. The late afternoon air pressed heavy around us, thick with unsaid things. I could feel it stretching between us, this unspoken thing neither of us wanted to touch. Jamie sighed and shut the hood with a dull thud. All right, try starting it. I slid into the driver's seat, turning the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died. Jamie groaned. Yeah, that's what I thought. I grinned at him through the windshield. You're so good at this. He shot me a look. Don't make me leave you stranded, kid. Something in my chest twisted. He hadn't called me kid in years. And the way he said it now, like he was reminding himself of something, made my stomach drop. I forced a smirk. You wouldn't dare. Jamie rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. Instead, he leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching me through the open window. For a moment, we just stared at each other. And maybe it was the heat, or the way the light hit his face, or maybe it was just me being reckless. But for the first time, I let myself wonder. What if I stopped pretending? Jamie sighed, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. All right, well, you're not going anywhere in this thing. Wow, you sure? Maybe if I just manifest hard enough. Or you could let me actually fix it. He cut in, smirking. But it's going to take a while. I need to grab some tools from my place. I hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky. The summer afternoon had slipped away, the air turning heavy with the promise of rain. Probably not a great idea to drive back now, I pointed out. Storms rolling in. Jamie looked toward the horizon, where thick clouds gathered in bruised shades of gray and blue. Yeah, figures. He exhaled, tilting his head at me. Guess that means I'm stuck here, huh? My stomach flipped. I tried to sound casual. Looks like it. Jamie let out a low chuckle and shook his head. All right, guess I'll make myself at home. The storm hit just after dark. Rain pounded against the roof, wind rattling the windows. The power flickered once, twice, then cut out completely, plunging the house into thick silence. Great, I muttered. Perfect. Jamie leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, looking completely unbothered. Got candles? Yeah. Huh. I grumbled, rummaging through a drawer. I found a few, along with some matches, and lit them one by one. Warm, flickering light filled the space, shadows dancing across the walls. Cozy, Jamie said. Just the mood I was going for. His lips twitched. He pushed off the counter and stretched, his shirt lifting just slightly, revealing a sliver of skin. I looked away quickly, swallowing hard. You got anything to eat? He asked. Depends. You like peanut butter sandwiches? Jamie gave me a look. You weren't lying about being helpless, huh? I scoffed. Hey, peanut butter is a perfectly respectable dinner. He laughed, shaking his head. Come on, let's see what you got. I'll make something decent. I watched as he rummaged through my fridge like he owned the place, pulling out ingredients with the easy confidence of someone who had been here 100 times before. And he had, but it felt different now. He moved around my kitchen like he belonged here, like this wasn't just a temporary fix for a broken-down car in a summer storm. Like he could stay. I leaned against the counter, watching him. The candlelight flickered over his face, casting warm shadows against his sharp jawline, his steady hands. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask if he felt it too, this thing between us, this weight in the air. But I didn't, because if I asked, he might answer. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. After dinner, we settled into the living room, the storm still raging outside. Jamie stretched out on the couch, arms crossed behind his head, watching the candlelight flicker against the ceiling. Been a while since I just sat, he murmured. I sank into the armchair, pulling my legs up. Yeah. He glanced at me. Life gets busy. I nodded, tracing patterns against the fabric of the chair. You ever think about slowing down? Jamie was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, he admitted. Something in my chest tightened. Before I could think too hard about it, I said, You could. Jamie turned his head slightly, looking at me. Could what? Slow down. Stay somewhere for a while. I hesitated, then forced the words out. Stay here. A flicker of something crossed his face, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. You saying you want me around? He asked, his voice quiet. My mouth went dry. The easy thing would have been to laugh it off, to roll my eyes and make a joke. But I was tired of easy, so I held his gaze and said, yeah, I am. Jamie didn't look away. The air between us was thick, electric, charged with something I didn't have words for, something that felt like the edge of cliff. And I wasn't sure which one of us was going to jump first. The rain drummed steadily against the windows, drowning out everything except the quiet crackle of candlelight. The room felt smaller in the dark, like the storm had pushed the walls closer together, trapping us inside. Jamie was still watching me, his face unreadable. You want me around? He repeated, his voice softer this time. I swallowed hard. Yeah. His expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to make my pulse stutter, enough to make my chest feel tight. He turned his gaze back to the ceiling, exhaling slow. Gotta admit, didn't expect you to say that. Why not? I asked, my throat dry. Jamie let out a quiet laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Because you never say what you're thinking. I tensed. That's not true. He turned his head, looking at me again. Really looking. It is, though. My stomach twisted. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent years swallowing words, burying things too deep to touch. But here, now, with him stretched out on my couch, his voice low and careful, it felt impossible to keep pretending. Jamie sighed, shifting his arm beneath his head. You know, I was married for a long time. I nodded. Yeah. You ever wonder why it didn't work out? I hesitated. I figured it was just one of those things. People grow apart. Jamie hummed, like he was considering that. Then he said, I think part of me always knew I wasn't meant for that kind of life. The whole marriage, family, settled down thing. My chest tightened. Right? He let the word hang between us for a beat too long before he said, but I think the bigger reason is I spent a long time lying to myself. Something cold pressed against the base of my spine. Jamie sat up slowly, leaning forward, forearms resting against his knees. The candlelight flickered across his face, catching in the shadows beneath his eyes. You ever do that? He asked quietly. I could barely breathe. Yeah, I admitted, the word barely above a whisper. Jamie nodded, like he already knew. I felt unsteady, like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't name. I gripped the armrest of my chair, my knuckles white. Jamie, how long? He asked, voice calm, steady. My throat closed up. He didn't have to clarify what he meant. How long have you felt this way? How long have you known? I could lie. I could brush it off, pretend like I didn't understand. But I was so tired of lying. So I took a shaky breath and said, a while. Jamie exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He didn't look away, didn't move. And then he said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. Me too. My heart stuttered. I stared at him, barely able to process the words, the weight of them. My voice broke. I swallowed, forcing the word out. You too. Jamie let out a rough laugh, shaking his head. Yeah, kid. Me too. I flinched at the nickname. He noticed. His lips parted like he was about to say something else, but instead, he sighed and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. I don't know when it started, he admitted. Maybe longer than I want to admit. But I didn't, he exhaled, looking up at the ceiling like it held answers. Didn't want to mess with your head. I laughed, shaky and breathless. Well, too late for that. Jamie looked at me sharply. His eyes searched my face, and something in his expression changed. He sat forward again, his hands clasped between his knees. Tell me what you're thinking, he said, his voice quiet. I let out a slow breath. I'm thinking I don't know what to do with this. Jamie's lips twitched. Yeah, me neither. A rumble of thunder rolled through the sky, shaking the windows. Neither of us moved. Is this a bad idea? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Jamie sighed. Probably. Silence stretched between us. But he didn't say no. He didn't get up. He didn't leave. And when I finally met his eyes again, I saw something there, something careful, something hesitant, something waiting. So I did the only thing I could do. I moved. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself up from the chair and crossed the space between us. Jamie watched me, his expression unreadable. I hesitated, pulse hammering, and then I sat down beside him. Neither of us spoke. My shoulder brushed his. He didn't move away. His breath was slow even, but his fingers twitched against his knee, a small, barely there movement. I reached out just slightly. My fingertips ghosted over his wrist. Jamie inhaled sharply. I froze. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he turned his hand over, his palm facing up. An invitation. My throat was dry. My pulse roared in my ears. And then, carefully, I let my fingers slip into his. Jamie exhaled, long and slow. His hand was warm, steady. He didn't grip mine tightly, didn't pull me closer. He just held on. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. Outside, the storm raged on. But here, in the quiet, in the dark, something had finally settled. Jamie's fingers curled around mine, firm but not insistent. He didn't rush, didn't push. He just held on. I swallowed, my pulse thudding in my ears. The weight of his hand, his warmth, his steadiness, was grounding and terrifying all at once. I had spent so long imagining something like this, but I had never let myself believe it could be real. But it was real. Jamie exhaled, shifting slightly beside me. Well, he murmured, his voice rough around the edges. That's something, huh? I let out a weak, breathless laugh. Yeah. The storm outside had softened, the rain turning to a steady drizzle. But inside, the air still crackled with something charged and restless. Jamie hadn't let go of my hand, and I hadn't let go of his. I stared down at where our fingers were tangled together, tracing the calluses along his knuckles with my thumb. So, I started, then trailed off. I had no idea what I wanted to say. Jamie let out a quiet chuckle. So, he echoed. A beat of silence. Then softer, what now? I hesitated, tightening my grip just slightly. I don't know. Jamie sighed, rubbing his free hand over his jaw. Me neither. He tilted his head back against the couch, looking up at the ceiling. But I guess we don't have to figure it all out tonight. I nodded, relief mixing with the unease in my chest. It wasn't a solution, wasn't a promise, but it wasn't nothing. Jamie turned his head slightly, looking at me from the corner of his eye. You okay? I exhaled. Yeah, just this is a lot. Jamie hummed low in his throat, like he understood. Yeah. For a long moment, we sat there in silence, hands still linked, the candlelight flickering across the walls. The weight in my chest slowly shifted, the uncertainty still there, but no longer unbearable. Jamie gave my hand a small squeeze, like an anchor. Then, in a voice so casual it almost didn't match the moment, he said, You ever gonna let me fix your damn car? I snorted, shaking my head. Wow, really ruining the moment, aren't you? His lips quirked. What? It's a legitimate question. I rolled my eyes. Fine. Fix my car if you can. Jamie scoffed. If I can? Please. I raised an eyebrow. It died on your watch. Because it was already a piece of shit. Rude. Jamie just smirked, but then his expression softened. He studied me for a long moment, his thumb brushing absently against the back of my hand. Something in my chest tightened. I could feel the shift, the change between us settling into something real. Something fragile. Maybe, but real. Jamie exhaled, shaking his head with a small, disbelieving laugh. This is going to be complicated. I swallowed hard. Probably. He tilted his head slightly, eyes warm but unreadable. You think it's worth it? I met his gaze, and this time I didn't hesitate. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I do. Jamie was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he lifted our joined hands and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. Soft. Barely there. But enough. Enough to tell me everything he wasn't saying. Enough to make my breath catch, my heart stutter. Outside, the storm had passed. But inside, something had only just begun. The rain had eased into a light drizzle. The storm finally retreating beyond the horizon. The house felt quieter now, not just because of the power outage, but because something between us had settled. Jamie still hadn't let go of my hand. I wasn't sure if he realized it, or if it was just instinct now. the way his thumb absently traced circles against my skin. I wasn't about to remind him. I leaned my head against the back of the couch, stealing a glance at him. The candlelight made him look softer somehow, less like the sharp, self-assured man who had walked through my door earlier, and more like the one who had just admitted, in his own way, that he had been running from this for a long time. "You're quiet," Jamie murmured, tilting his head slightly toward me. I let out a slow breath. "Just thinking." His lips quirked. "That's dangerous." I rolled my eyes, but the teasing didn't shake the warmth in my chest. Jamie sighed, glancing toward the darkened window. "Storm's over. I could probably head back now." A lump rose in my throat. I tried not to let it show. "Yeah," but he didn't move. His fingers flexed slightly around mine. He said slowly, "I could crash here for the night. Drive back in the morning." I swallowed. "Yeah." Jamie turned his head fully then, meeting my eyes. "Yeah." The words felt heavier than they should have, because we both knew this wasn't about the storm anymore. I nodded, my grip tightening around his hand. "Okay." Jamie held my gaze for a long moment, something quiet and unreadable in his expression. Then, finally, he exhaled and leaned back against the couch, his fingers lacing more firmly with mine. "Guess that means you're making breakfast," he muttered. I snorted. "Not unless you want burnt toast and instant coffee." Jamie groaned. "Hopeless." "You knew that already." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Guess I did." The easy banter settled something in me. Even with everything out in the open, we were still us. That was the part that mattered. I let my eyes drift closed, letting the exhaustion of the night sink in. I could feel Jamie's warmth beside me, the solid weight of his hand in mine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about what came next. I didn't need all the answers right now. Jamie was here, and that was enough. For now, it was more than enough.